Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver George Pickens' burner account on X is one of the most hilarious things you'll see in the NFL. Because after every single game, George Pickens just goes on there to talk his talk and say whatever he wants. And since it's under a different name, he can't get in trouble because no one knows if it's really him. And after this Browns game, he went on there and just crashed out on everyone, to some of the fans and even the Cleveland Browns players. But first, before I get more into it, make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn notifications for everything Pittsburgh Steelers news and updates. Also like this video. Now, let's get right back into it. So, you might have heard the name before. The name is Michael Bruley, and this is George Pickens' alleged burner account on X. At first, when this was brought up weeks ago, about Michael Bruley potentially being George Pickens, many people played it off as a joke. But after this week's game against the Cleveland Browns, it became more of a story. Because Michael Bruley, he just crashed out on all the Cleveland Browns players, and even the player at the back of the end zone that you seen George Pickens fighting at, you seen the reply that he said to him, and it was hilarious. And really, only someone with a personal vendetta like George Pickens would say. And when you scroll through Michael Bruley's just feed in general on X, everything related to the account is George Pickens. George Pickens, George Pickens, George Pickens. And you even see Michael Bruley refer to George Pickens as one issue. And when have you ever really heard anyone call George Pickens one issue other than George Pickens? That's George Pickens' IG username. So he's basically just calling himself one issue and referring to himself. And that's why many people think it's his burner account. Just the way he talks in general and the way he's crashing out on everyone. That has something to do with him. So now when you look at Michael Bruley's posts, just to go over some of them, basically what he's saying is to take one issue's overs on all the stats. When you look at the replies that he makes to certain people when talking about, hey, George Pickens, when he pointed at the Ravens player after he got hurt, Michael Bruley, he explained the situation. He said that the player tried to injure him that play before, and he was just talking talk before the play, and that you guys are taking one clip out of context. So he's basically explaining the situation of what happened. And then you look at Michael Bruley and talking about Newsome, that player who apparently George Pickens was fighting at the back of the end zone, and that was his fault. He's saying that Newsome better hope his contract ain't coming up soon. And then when Newsome replied saying that George Pickens is a fake tough guy, Michael Bruley responded by saying that he was hiding behind security. And he better hope his contract's not up, because that was his last down in the NFL if his contract is up after this season. Also, when fans were posting the picture of Dionate Johnson and George Pickens just taking a picture after the game and saying that was with a random player and he's humble for doing so, Michael Bruley basically responded by saying that's his brother and you guys are lame. So, Michael Bruley, he responds to everything George Pickens and just goes on there and crashes out. At first, really, you didn't believe it. Hey, this is not George Pickens' burner. This is just an account talking about George Pickens. But now, it's kind of getting to the point where it's just like, he's not even trying to hide it anymore. Michael Bruley, George Pickens, he wants you to know that's his burner account. He wants you to know that's him running the page. Because why not? It's under a different name anyway. It's not like the league could find him because they don't know that's him. It's not like the Steelers team could get mad at him because they don't know if it's him. It's under a different name. Michael Bruley has nothing to do with George Pickens at all. So you really don't know if it's him. But at the same time, if you're just following an account as a fan, you would know that it's him allegedly. So George Pickens, Michael Bruley, they're basically the same person allegedly. But this is how George Pickens obviously relieves all of his stress. He just goes on there to say whatever he wants. And it's better than him going on his main account as one issue, George Pickens, and going there and crashing out on there. Because if he did that, then it would be a whole storyline. The media will talk about it. You see all the networks, they'll talk about it. You see he'll be asked questions about it in the media. And then it goes to the coaches. It goes to the players. And then the media starts asking his team about it. And that's when it becomes a problem. So if it's under a different account and George Pickens is doing this under Michael Bruley, sure, this is the best way you could do it. Because then no one knows if it's really you, even though you're making obvious that it is. There's really no way you could get in trouble from the NFL or your team, and the media should not cover it because it's under a completely different name. But if this is how he releases all of his stress and doesn't have to do it on his main account and get those fines, get his team in trouble, then sure, let him do it. And if he continues to play well, sure, why not? Me personally, I just find it a hilarious thing that George Pickens is doing. And to be honest, if you have to follow Michael Bruley on X, it's really a good follow if you want to keep up with it and keep up with all the things that George Pickens is saying. But anyway, before I move on to end this video, let me just talk about one last thing. Stephen A. Smith and all these other people in the media talking about George Pickens on that final play where it was a Hail Mary by Russell Wilson, a jump ball in the back of the end zone, and how George Pickens ended up fighting that guy outside the back end zone. Many people are blaming on George Pickens, how he distracted, how he let his team down, because he didn't go up for the ball, because he was fighting the guy in the back of the end zone instead of going up for the ball. But when you look at that play, you look at that player on the Browns, he was basically pushing or guiding George Pickens out the back of the end zone, not even letting him have a chance to have a play on the ball. There's no way George Pickens could have made a play on that ball with the way the Browns player was guiding him and basically holding him and pushing him out the back of the end zone. It wasn't until the ball hit the ground where George Pickens actually ended up fighting the guy or pushing the guy or being all over them, and then the two of them went back and forth. It wasn't until the play was actually over until that happened where George Pickens kind of threw the guy away from him. So when you look at that play, George Pickens had no chance of getting to that ball. And to be honest, if you want to blame one person on that play for not going up on that ball, blame Mike Williams. Because when you look at Mike Williams, he had the best chance. He should have been the first player to put his hands on that ball. If he really wanted to, he could have got both of his hands on that ball because he was the closest person to it. But he just stood and looked at the ball and watched it hit the ground without even making a move towards it. It's basically what Darnell Washington did in the back of the end zone weeks back, where if he jumped at 6'8", he could have made a play on the ball. And Mike Williams at 6'5", if he jumped, he could have made a play on the ball. So if there's one player that the media should have been talking about not putting an effort on that final play, it was Mike Williams. I watched it play many times back. Many times. Even when it first happened. When we first lost the game. Watched it back many times. Mike Williams was the closest person to it. He could have easily undercut it and been the first person to lay hands on the ball. It's not like he would have caught it. It could have still got knocked out. But he didn't even make an attempt on it. But everyone in the media is talking about George Pickens and how he didn't make an effort on the play. How he let his team down because he was fighting the guy in the back of the end zone instead of paying attention and going up for the football. But they don't look at what actually happened in the play and how the Browns player was riding him all the way out of bounds and was all over him, and it should have been a flag, but it wasn't. And how other players had better chances of making a play on the ball, but they didn't even go for it. It was just all about George Pickens because he is a bad person, he fights players, he always gets mad and things like that. Just the narrative around him is always so bad that the media just wants to talk about all the negative, even though it's not his fault. Blame him for something that's not his fault. So this is another instance of that, and George Pickens is sick of it, and he just goes on his burner account and just crashes out on everyone. From the fans talking the talk about him, he just crashes out on them. From the players talking bad about him, and the players getting on his nerves, he just talks about them. Whether they bring it first or he brings it up first, he'll talk about whoever on that account. Anyway, it seems as though George Pickens just is a hilarious player in general, on the field, off the field, and that account is a great follow. Whether or not it's him, I believe it is, the fans believe it is, but allegedly, who knows. So you look at George Pickens, and people are trying to act as if he's not having a career year. All the media talk about him is always so negative. I don't know why people are trying to act as if George Pickens coming into last week wasn't like top 5 in receiving yards for wide receivers in the entire NFL. He's basically the only consistent playmaker the Pittsburgh Steelers have at the wide receiver position. So he's the player who's getting it done for the Steelers, but the talk around him is always so negative just because of the way he acts. But people are trying to act as if he's a bad person when he's not. It's just that he's different in a type of way. So let me hear your thoughts down in the comments below about this whole situation about Michael Bruley. Do you believe the Michael Bruley account is George Pickens? Have you seen this before? Do you follow the account? Let me hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Or do you just believe that it's just a random person trying to act as George Pickens. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn notifications for everything Pittsburgh Steelers news, updates, highlights, analysis reports, everything surrounding Pittsburgh Steelers. I have it covered. And especially if you want to watch and listen to Steelers news and not have to read it, this is the channel for you. So stay tuned to the channel, like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, that's it for me. I'll see you guys all later. I'm out. Peace.